Hello, welcome to SHOWstudio. We are now knee-deep in London Men's Fashion Week, Autumn-Winter 2017. And today we're discussing Wales Bonner. So I'm going to have my panelists introduce themselves, starting with Thomas at the end.
Hi, I'm Thomas Cohen, and I'm a musician and vintage archivist.
I'm Daley. I'm a menswear designer based in London.
I'm Tschan, a transgender activist and a former model.
I'm Campbell, Addy, a photographer and founder of Me Agency and Me Journal.
Thanks for coming. Sorry we're starting a bit late, but there's been a tube strike and things like that. But thanks for bearing with us. So Wales Bonner has been this fantastic runaway success in London. I remember being at the St. Martin's show that her graduate collection where she won the L'Oreal Prize, and that was only in 2014. Since then it's been winning the BFA's Emerging Designer. She's won the LVMH Prize, and she was nominated at the BFA's this year as Best Men's Designer alongside Tom Ford and Vivienne Westwood. So in the span of a very short amount of time, she's generated a lot of interest within the industry. And a lot of the conversation has kind of been about how radical, I suppose, her voice is. So I'm kind of interested in talking a bit more about that and why the industry is kind of accepting this message in the way that it is, seeing that she's been so successful. But before we go into politics, I kind of just want to talk about the clothes. Because the thing that really stands out to me about Grace is her research. It's just incredibly well researched. The garments are incredibly well made, and that's always the thing that stands out to me straight away. And we're lucky to have Thomas, who works on some of the vintage for Grace.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of interested in the process behind it and the kind of attention to history that's involved in her putting together her collection.
Yeah, I mean, I helped very minimally. There was like a small part in Grace is much greater vision, and it was just kind of fascinating for me as somebody who's very passionate about clothes and has collected for however long I have, 10 years or something, and watching her eye and the research that she does, watching it kind of go from like market photographs in the Caribbean to paintings, Renaissance paintings, and then like 70s sportswear, and then Jacobean ruffs and World's End, and it all through her eyes makes so much sense. And watching her in the studio, it's like watching a conductor or something.
Right. And it's like it seems a very like intellectual approach to me. I know because I've worked on some music with her before, and the stuff that she brings, the research that she does in libraries and stuff, it's an obsession. It's very focused, and that's why it delivers such a kind of I guess elegant and sophisticated look at the end. I'm interested, Nicholas, in your process as a designer as well, and your attention to historical things like some of the stuff Thomas mentioned.
Yeah, no, totally. I think I'd agree with Thomas as well with Grace, how she mixes different styles and genres from a garment format. And the same with my stuff, I kind of work with the vintage garments as well, been collecting for a while. But yeah, no, I feel that even from the beginning, you could tell she had her own sort of signature on what she was picking up on, from the graduate collection even through to now. And it's great to see, the progression, and obviously having good people hunt around with some gems. I should probably ask him where he's getting it from. But yeah, no, it's really great to see. So.
And she always has these really focused kind of themes and narratives behind each. I remember the last was a story, I think it was called Malik, and it was the story of someone who travelled to Ethiopia, and in a lot of the kind of campaign work that she does, stuff with Harley Weir, it's always been very there's always been this really strong sense of a kind of narrative behind it, whether it was spirituals or Malik. She delivers fantastic stuff. What do you guys think of Grace and how she's been involved in the London scene?
I think it's great. Like, I was at the graduation show as well.
Yeah.
And for me, being of like a younger generation, it was quite just exciting to see a portrayal of black men in such a way that wasn't so obvious or so tough. I guess it was confident but really soft. And how it progressed even to the seasons now, where she's gone to other countries, like with Harley when she went to Senegal,
and India and stuff.
with the boxers, like everything like that. There's a whole, it encompasses more than just the look. I feel like there's such a history and also such a depth. I don't know, for me it's like depth of family, because I can relate to it as well as just looking at it. Yeah, these images are great.
These are the Senegalese wrestlers, I think.
Like, I love it. Like, everything about it is more than just, like, sort of comes 360 from the research to the visual to the clothes and to the people. Yeah, I love it. I guess.
I think she's just like a really conscious person. She's doing, I don't know, nothing that anyone's doing right now at all. She's, I don't know, like showcasing people of colour in a way that shows their humanity and not just like, I don't know, a fetishization of. And from a person of colour's point of view, so not just like an observer and their perception of.
It's also interesting as well, she's got a mixed race background, and so I guess a lot of, when she's talked about her process and what, how she creates clothes, it's often to do with this maybe conflicted sense of self growing up as a mixed person. And I know she's talked about experiences of not being black enough for the black kids and not being white enough for the white kids, and having to really grapple with that sense of identity, having a Jamaican father. But so that's something that comes across in the kind of imagery about it, this real desire to deal with her black identity and her history,
it's a
her
duality.
family. Yeah.
Duality, because obviously she's is of Jamaican descent, but she's also English.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like you've got that duality of clashing cultures. Especially growing up in our generation has been such a clash of what are you, who are you, sort of thing. But I think with the way she portrays the clothes, I think it really touches on, from a West African to a Jamaican to a British mixed race. It sort of encompasses all the harboured feelings you've grown up with that hasn't been portrayed.
In such a delicate way as well. It's actually so beautiful.
Yeah, the word delicate and tender and poetic come up a lot.
Well, yeah, because I think I remember reading, I think she did like a little zine when she was doing a pop-up machine, and she was talking about how her uncles and cousins or whatnot were always, she didn't see them in the men that were portrayed online or in fashion or in films. They're always like really robust and aggressive and angry. And even just the little things like rosy cheeks, it's things like, and that sounds really small, but I was like, oh, you never imagine a brown, dark-skinned guy to have rosy cheeks, and it looks hot and it looks great, So it's things like that. It's the subtleties that just bring it to life, because it's really relatable. Like, you can just reach out and touch it, as opposed to the caricatures that some people portray of men in fashion.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, no,
Go ahead.
I'll just touch on the mixed sort of point you made, because that was something which I felt I could obviously bring some my own viewpoint, obviously being mixed as well with a Jamaican dad and a Scottish mum. So, but I think for me, same with Grace, I think she'd hopefully agree, is that it gives you a wider pool, in terms of, for the last 2 seasons I've been looking at my Scottish heritage, and obviously before that at St. Martin's, looking more at my Afro-Caribbean side of my sort of makeup, and so I think for her and you can see that within her work, there's definitely this crossing boundaries, and I think being mixed is probably a positive thing, and it reflects through to her work. So I thought that was quite a good point, because I think that is also important to how she's able to communicate with her clothing. So.
And how does she create? I'm interested in your perspective, Thomas. How does she create this softness, this kind of very delicate masculinity? I think a lot of people bring up masculinity in her work. I think she's obviously very interested in men, and how does she create this kind of delicacy with the clothes?
I think it's just through absolute honesty. I think her work is as honest as can be, and that just comes across with the most extreme beauty, you know. It's interesting, I was thinking about this, and I don't necessarily, if I look at her clothes, I don't think about masculinity or femininity particularly. It's just insanely beautiful and very powerful. And the show just now, it was exactly the same.
You've just come from the show.
Yeah.
Yes.
I snuck in, snuck out again. And that was what came across to me. I think it's interesting that people get caught up in those things, you know, but I understand why they do, but it's not something I necessarily think about when I look at the images, you know, or the clothes. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter if it's masculine or not. That's what I feel.
Yeah, she's. I mean, there we go. That's my first hiccup right there. I had to get that out of the way. I also remembered I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Finn Mactaggart. I'm guest hosting. I didn't just sneak in, but yeah. Well. I think you touched on a point about relatability with these clothes, and I'm kind of interested, and also we're talking about beauty and sophistication, and it's all very luxe, it's all very luxury, and a lot of these references are quite, they're very proud and they're quite regal in some ways, and I'm interested in whether the kind of luxury aspect of what she does might undermine the political message at all, or if there is a political message, but how she can relate doing something that's very about kind of black identity politics with having incredibly expensive garments that probably get sold to a very small niche client, or even being accepted into the kind of Louis Vuitton LVMH world. You know, how do you kind of square those two parts of her brand?
Well, it's a bit like it's like yes and no. It's bittersweet because you're talking about people inspired by it or interested in it or come from it aren't necessarily able to buy into it. However, it's changing the face of the people who would be interested in it. So, being part of the LVMH and more higher luxury does elevate it to a point where you don't see brown people, or not even brown people, just people of diversity, whether it's race or age, interested in luxury. Because you think luxury now, and this is luxury to me, which I think is great. Whereas maybe 10, 15 years ago, you may not have instantly thought of the Milik or Senegal as luxury. So I think it's a great thing.
Does anyone own any Wales Bonner? I'm kind of interested in
that.
that. Has anyone bought any Wales Bonner? No.
No, I worked for a coat, which I was very
right. I mean, it's not really a fault of Grace's. There's a lot of people who are selling a kind of what people describe as a progressive vision and end up kind of selling a t-shirt for £400, which seems like the opposite of a progressive vision. So that's kind of a industry-wide issue. But I do find it interesting that she's been so successful with this vision of black masculinity when, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about casting and all white casts or things like that. I'm interested in your perspective as a former model, as you described yourself, in the casting world. I mean, there's been a lot of kind of maybe tokenistic gestures as of late about kind of having people being represented, but you know, is that really giving people of colour power within the industry? Or
Well, whenever I used to go to castings, I was literally the only person, the only black person there.
Yeah.
There was just a sea of variation of the same white girl. And that was just on a continuum. And if there was like, I don't know, like someone who would represent a black girl, it would always be like a mixed race girl, and it wouldn't necessarily be like a fully black model. But then again, I'm also trans, so then there will be like a fetishization of like, and a like tokenism of like using just one trans model kind of thing. So it's kind of, I don't know, distorted a bit for me, my experience. Yeah.
how do you do your casting?
Predominantly street casting. I mean, a lot of my guys are friends which I know, or people within my sort of group of friends, as I felt, you know, for me, I don't know, probably maybe Grace felt the same way, you know, when you're sort of sitting there, going through your process of design and thinking, who is my guy, or how do I relate to it, you know, even when I go through onto agencies, you know, kind of looking through who's there and who can sort of reflect my feeling. I do find it's hard. It's basically, you know, sometimes the black guys just look like white guys, but they're black. They're short hair, you know, in terms of all these great features, you know, which you know should be, you know, celebrated more within the modelling side, I feel. But yeah, I guess for me it is a mixture, but generally street casting is kind of where I go, and I think Grace does have a good mixture of that. I think she has used guys who are friends, and also, you know, highly sort of used sort of models within the industry. So I think she does it quite well in terms of bringing in different elements within her casting. So and it's always great, you know, and in terms of the, you know, men, women, black, white, ginger, you know, the full spectrum, which I think is great, and I think more designers should try and move forward for being more open. But you know, I guess this is a conversation and an issue which has been going on for quite some time. So you know, hopefully with more people, you know, like Grace and other designers who are coming through and castings. I know you have your own casting agency. So yeah, you know, hopefully we'll start seeing more diversity within it.
And I think honesty is a good word as well, because in the casting as well, it's just very honest. Maybe it's not intentionally political or about a particular idea, but it's an honest representation of what she's looking into culturally, historically, and that's maybe what's missing from some of the debate about more progressive casting, is that it always just ends up being a kind of token gesture, and it's not really honest to what a brand is about, or what a designer or casting director is really about.
Or just done for one season, just to silence critics.
But it's just things like, you can tell by the casting. I think Joyce does the casting, which is fabulous.
Joyce is fantastic.
Like, I think every season I'm like, oh, these boys are great. Because like, I can imagine, like, I'm not in the workroom with the researchers and Grace, but I can imagine, like, look, number 3 here, he would have been like on the mood board, but his ancestors from, I don't know if he's Bangladeshi or Turkish Cypriot, but you know, somewhere from that region. So then I imagine if Joyce is going out, it's quite easy because they've got the research down, and it's not, okay, cool, we're just going to use really, like, you know, it models with 20k following. Like, no, it's like, these are really, like, I think it's believable and it's honest in the sense that, and even when I have the ginger model, it's not like, oh, okay, pop one in there. It's like, okay, I can imagine it, because obviously she's got the duality. So yeah, I think it's just, I don't know, more of this. And it should be great.
And I find it interesting also the Indian boys. I mean, there's so few Indian boys at all.
It's really bad.
And that's been really fantastic as somebody who's put on. I mean, there's a lot of people who have come through Grace. Like, I'm thinking of Wilson Oriema. Who is
iconic.
Wilson is the most gorgeous man, and he's the most wonderful man.
So gentle.
Yeah.
Literally.
and you know, he's gone on to do, I think, Calvin Klein
Amazing.
stuff.
Yeah.
And, I was in New York recently, and he was all up on the billboard. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's fantastic. So it's been great to see boys come through that and you know, achieve something within the industry. I mean, how because you've set up a casting agency.
Yeah.
How has that been? Why did you feel the need to do it?
Because during my final year at CSM, I was doing like my final major project would turn into my magazine, and I don't know, I was just inspired by my friends and friends of friends, and like we've all got mutual friends within this little 5 people sitting here, and it was just like I just found it really naff to have this idea based around, say, my heritage in Ghana, my upbringing, and then just go get a model because they have 20k followers or they've just done an iCAD. I'm like, that doesn't relate to me. So I just was like, okay, I'm going to start finding people that relate, and it was really hard. Like it was, and I didn't realize how hard it was because I'm like, okay, I love to shoot an Indian girl based on my best friend called Serhi. Oh, okay, there's only 2.
Right.
And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense for me. And then so I set up the casting agency just because I was just like, me and my friends are always on the street, always like, oh, we'd love to shoot you. And then 2 weeks later, oh, we'd love to shoot you. I was like, hang on, this is really, really unproductive. Why don't we have a home and a hub for all the people that we love to shoot? And also a big like sort of like an FU to the, I don't know, the construct of you have to go through certain channels to produce something. Like it's great to shoot your friends who work at Safeways or Tesco and they still look hot, you know? They could be on the Calvin Klein lab one day and sitting in Morley's. I think that's great.
I think that's more interesting as well, actually.
Yeah.
Well, it's on it,
They're
like
just
you
like a
believe
model,
it,
It's more real.
you know?
Yeah.
And they're more than just a face. Like, I don't know, if you talk to Wilson, he's not more interesting. He's more than just, like, I wouldn't never just say someone's just a model. Or like King, who walks with Grace, who's signed with us. He's an illustrator and he's also likes music and he wants to design clothes. And it's just so much more interesting when you street cast, you get to know that. Whereas when you go to an agency, just like, yeah, that's their feed,
And they all walk identically as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is very
And
frustrating.
they all look identical.
Yeah,
And
as
they all
well.
look identical, exactly. And they smell identical.
And you're like, who are
Backstage,
you
it's
again?
like
And you feel so bad because you get their
Deep
name.
V's.
What's that?
Deep V's and like top 10 Spotify playlists and earphones.
There you go,
So
exactly.
nice that it's just. I don't think in a few years that kind of model will be as prevalent.
I hope not.
It doesn't translate.
No.
I kind
To
of hope
people
like
who are
this
so
social.
passionate about fashion.
Right.
It doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a lack of real muses.
Yeah.
Yes. No,
Um,
literally, that's it.
It's like there's been a kind of it's very homogenous, and we're lacking those types of muses. And I think that's what's really strong about Grace. She obviously really has muses that actually inspire her to make garments. And when she kind of finds people like Wilson or like Max, who she's uses
first
quite
look,
often in the first look there, you know, it gives her more of a kind of idea to work around, and that's what great designers have always done. But if you're kind of a top 10 Spotify playlist type of model that walks exactly the same and it's kind of been coached to the nth degree, then there's nothing to design there. Let's have a look at the show then. I mean, Thomas, you've already seen it, but I'd be interested to get your kind of perspective and give these other guys a bit more time to digest the images.
Yeah.
Maybe if we can go back to number 1 and just start from the top with Max.
I want the shoes.
There he is. Hats seem to be a big feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also wearing a hat. Nicholas is wearing a hat.
Yep.
So
Some sort of wrap or.
I remember. I think the hats are from a painting from a Renaissance painting.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact one. I know the shoes were a collaboration, weren't they? With
Okay.
what's the shoe brand from Sex and the City?
Manolo Blahnik.
So the shoes are a collaboration with them. Sorry for my lack of shoe and TV knowledge. And again, I think it was such a whole piece. The music was quite brutal, which I was surprised by, which was really nice. And the clothes translated amazingly, and the casting, you know, everything was pretty much like beautiful. and I think a real progression, you know.
Yeah.
And I know that they're quite militant about that. They're like, no flares, no shells.
Right.
And for a designer who's gaining notoriety and, you know, to not just rest on what you know and what people expect from you, I think is really exciting.
I think this look 8's quite interesting. I think with the embroidery and using the sequins, I think that's obviously been a trademark of Grace's. You kind of know straight away when you see those details, and obviously, you know, the work involved is, you know, there's a lot of craft and time into that. So I think they're always impressive to see what she does and how she uses it on different garments. And no, it's great. That's definitely one of her signatures, which I think sort of embodied her kind of sort of playfulness of, you know, this luxury, mixing it in with, you know, different elements. So and obviously the tailoring as well is obviously
I love number
seems
10.
quite more apparent.
That's so cool.
Oh, thank you.
Number 10 is great. Like just a silhouette with the gloves, like how skin tight gloves, and it's quite baggy. Like
I think that
really
piece
cool.
was a dress.
Okay.
Which one?
Yeah.
The
number 10 with
10.
the, with
It's
the
an actual
gloves.
Oh,
Is it a
that's
dress?
fab.
Yeah,
No, it's great.
yeah, very much so. And all of the models in white walked differently to the rest of the models. It was really offsetting and totally engaged you.
Right.
With, you know, sometimes when you're at a fashion show, it's quite difficult to engage with the same pace and the same walk. It really threw you off. It was really powerful. Number 13, like with the square tie, which I think is really nice and something new.
Like a plastic
for
bag.
Grace.
Or
Yeah,
something.
I think
Just to add in this sort
so
of.
I think it's sequined, but it's that kind of market feeling to things. But also, I think
Something quite casual but elegant.
Absolutely.
Within that look.
and some of the most familiar Wales Bonner looks as well in terms of silhouette and clothing, you know, but with that same beauty that she does. I really liked the suit. I was really, it was kind of
The
surprised by the
15.
suit. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
That,
it's a
like,
nice
blue
cut.
blunt
Yeah,
cut.
it looks nice.
absolutely.
It's like wider shoulder, but
Yeah,
fits quite well.
and untucked shirts, long ties.
Because I mean, the thing with Grace is, from what I've seen, they have been quite more slim and fitted.
Yeah,
So it's quite interesting to see her use a silhouette which is slightly wider and, you know, in terms of that sort of shapes and cuts she's working on.
I guess it's incorporating a bit more of a kind of late 80s.
Yeah, I was going to say,
tailoring
yeah, it's more
to
of an
it.
80s sort of tape. That's
Yeah.
kind of the vibe I got with that 15 and 16.
Yeah.
So,
Which is nice, you know, and it's nice to not see the 70s again.
yeah, I know. She
And have
references the
those
70s a lot because I think as a period in time in terms of black consciousness globally, I think that was, you know, even for me naturally, you kind of look around that time, you know, you look at photographers like Colin Jones and people like that looking at sort of like the Black Panthers, you know, I think that's the reason why Grace probably draws to that as a period of time where there was a lot of explosion of sort of, you know, ideas and, you know, styling and music, and, you know, I think it all encapsulates. So I think that's always, I think she's always kind of, even from St. Martin's, I think she's always sort of had that kind of 70s flares, you know, that kind of
And at her
character.
V&A presentation, I think at the end all the models put their fist up in the air.
And at the end of this, everyone put their hand to their chest,
Oh, okay.
which was like, again, it was so emotional, you know, and engaging, which is just so rare at a fashion show, you know.
Those pants.
Yeah, they're really good, aren't they?
So like a houndstooth
Leather,
check, but
yeah.
leather patchwork hounds.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite
And
strong.
I'd seen a picture as well, you mentioned the music being quite brutal. I'd seen a picture of a really large sound system.
Yeah, which was.
What was the vibe with the music, and how did that?
So it started when you entered. It was all very kind of piano-y and echoey,
Right.
and then as the models emerged, it took a much more almost industrial turn to things, and again with the different pacing of the models in different looks, and the female models were so striking, they're so beautiful.
Is that a female model?
Yeah,
yeah,
so number 24. And again, you kind
Is
of
it
got
20?
a bit more. Oh no,
23. Is it 24? Oh, yeah, it's 24.
24.
Sorry, apologies.
you got a bit more of a kind of like a 90s leather jacket with all of the other, you know, more Wales bonnery expectations.
I mean, there are no cowrie shells at all, are there?
No.
Right. Which has been a motif of the whole thing.
And duffel coats as well. Which
I was
isn't
very
something
surprised
you'd
to see
expect.
duffel coats, yeah. I mean, I'm interested in the sound system as well, because I mean, this is just coming from somebody who does music. But obviously, there's having a huge sound system. The history of Jamaican sound systems is
it's very much
rich. So
had that. You know, they're all different sized amps, and there's
Yeah.
a big square in the
Yeah.
centre.
I mean, it's a real progression. It feels very much like a, I mean, someone who's just come from being nominated for being menswear designer at the BFAs, and she's obviously been working very hard. There's a lot. It seems like a lot of different silhouettes and a lot of different
Textures and
ideas
fabrics.
going on.
Unexpected.
Yeah.
Seems like the most playful in terms of, like I said, with textures and fabrics, and, the different styles. You know, like the duffel coat, but still mixing in those pieces which we all kind of know her for. So.
Yeah.
And perhaps now that she kind of feels quite confident in having set up a brand that's very identifiable, is able to kind of relax into playing with more different styles,
sure.
and not using similar motifs all the time to tell the story. I mean, 30 is just gorgeous. That's fantastic.
It's another dress, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that is definitely.
You know, but looking through all this, it's very much, it's the first time seeing it. It's so different to what I would have thought. I'm like, but in like a really like, oh, thank God, I'm so happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just, because it's like, it's progressive, but it's still like, I'm still gagging for the next look. And I'm like, what's next? And
I had, having sourced stuff for the collection as well, I had exactly the same feeling. You know, I was like surprised and really like infused by everything.
no, just interesting. I love the shoes throughout, like, and then this coat, number 31. It's just, I've never, I don't know, just certain things in my head I'm like, oh, that's not Grace Wells bonnet. But then I'm looking at it and it's Grace Wells bonnet.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I don't know, it's sort of like making double check myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm like, oop, I
That's
should
good,
be so
though.
narrow-minded,
Yeah.
which I think is great. I think every designer should do that. So every season you see them, they convince you that this is me, not us, the public, telling them,
And I think a lot of the discussion around Grace, I mean, you talked about not really seeing masculinity or femininity, but just seeing beauty and honesty and integrity, and obviously real talent just in crafting clothes. And I suppose as she's progressing now, that is more of a signature than anything like cowrie shells or kind of references of black nationalism, but just gorgeous tailoring and really sophisticated clothes. I mean, it's still, I mean, even though you're looking at kind of this carrier bag reference and some more kind of street fashions or market referencing type stuff, it's still incredibly luxe.
Yeah, the hat's great.
Hat is good.
And this medal in number 6 kind of reminds me of the last collection in Malik, where she was doing these type of, they were like medals.
Yeah.
There's a sense of maturity to it. Not saying that it wasn't mature before, just a sense of like going back to with the lime green top with the hat.
Yeah.
It's very simple, which comes across as, I don't know, really confident, because you can so overdress and overstyle. Whereas with this, it's like each look, I'm like, I get it, and it's like great. But then I don't know, there's no sense of like kerfuffle. This is literally
There's
what
an
it
ease,
is.
Yeah.
There's an ease to it. Like how we were talking about the honesty before. I feel like this is like a rawer version, if that makes, even though there isn't so much based on like blackness or like I wouldn't look at this because they're black or masculinity, but I still feel it's a lot more rawer than the previous collections that have come about. I think it's great.
It's showcasing her talent, I think, and just showing that she can just make beautiful clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah, tailoring was really good.
And where is the? Because I'm seeing kind of Art Deco-y type stuff in the background. What was the venue that she chose to show?
It was what was it? Number 66 Portland Place. I hadn't been there before.
Right.
But it definitely had like a slight Art Deco.
Right.
An Art Deco door.
Right. But I mean, it's always very important with designers with as strong a vision as this to take it out of where everyone else is showing, basically.
That's the character.
Yeah.
What was it like walking into it? Because I'm imagining like this piano echoey, and then, but what was it like? Was the venue quite? I don't know, what was it like in the interior and so?
It was incredibly calm, incredibly calm and serene and you know, there was no. I mean, you know, you walk into a fashion show and there's obviously a chunk of people who have media tickets who are on their phone. So there was that, but then once you sat down, you kind of were engaged with everything before anybody even walked out. And there was absolutely, I think, a sense of anticipation, you know, before the first model came out, who's Max. Is it Max?
Yes.
And I know he spends a lot of time in the studio and stuff. What you were saying before about casting, he's just such a nice guy. And I think that you can see that and you can feel that when he walks, you know. Is it up?
Some of them.
I think that's a video, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, I'm quite interested in who. There's
when they
the.
came out with the hands on them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very simple thing to do, but I think the power of it, just by putting your hand over your heart, and the references and the connotations it has, it obviously vibrates through kind of, you know, very simple thing and subtle thing. But again, I guess that's Grace. You know, she's subtle but with power at the same time. So I think that's like how you said, the V&A with the whole fist in the air. You know, these small things. You know, it's
not
small gestures, but.
It's not gimmicky at all.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it kind of all communicates and relates with each other. It's interesting again seeing the guys in the skirts as well. That's obviously from the previous image.
And this is, I think, just her second runway. I mean, she kind of started off doing presentations, which are always very well thought out in terms of doing a very nice set. Whether it was at the V&A, I mean, there's a picture of it there. With Manolo Blahniks, there we go. Whether doing it at the V&A or her first Fashionista presentation, but seeing the Mallet collection and seeing this, it just seems so much more appropriate in a runway context. I'm really interested in who her customer is. I don't know if that's really I don't know if that's always a necessary question, but it's kind of thinking about what the future of her as a designer is. Whether this is just a kind of preamble to her kind of working at a European house, or whether she really wants to build a brand that kind of sells clothes commercially. You know, these are obviously very luxury items. They're not very everyday items for most people. And they generally require you to be pretty skinny. But having tried some of them on myself. So, yeah, who do you think of as her customer, and what do you think? Where do you think she's building this brand to go, or to do?
I mean, I think it's definitely an interesting time to be thinking about that question with Grace, because I remember seeing first shows and thinking to myself, like, I want that, but how?
Right.
And then, you know, a few years later, I'm pretty sure it's true. She didn't used to lend.
Right.
To stylists who were just doing editorials.
Right.
So she was saying no to people, and she's saying no to people who are like, hi, can I wear you to the GQ buffet of the year or whatever. And so that definitely built this want and need for it, because it just didn't exist. I know she's in Dover Street now and a few other places, right? But it definitely feels like that happened last season. I think she actually does lend to editorials now. But again, before, when she wasn't, she would just say to a magazine like Days, like, no, we are going here and I am using these people and it's only my clothes, and Tom Guinness is going to do it, who's very involved. So I think that, for me personally, before, you know, knowing or working with the brand, made me want it. And there's still things from past shows where I'm like, oh, you know, I know it's not necessarily every day, but I would love a tracksuit with crystals all over it every day.
Would you wear a tracksuit with crystals all over it, Tschan?
Of course I would.
I knew the answer to that one.
I think, I know, in terms of a customer, I'm thinking in the future, like just saying how we were talking about luxury before and how it's elevating it to change people's perceptions. I think the customer in the next 10 years will be us, I guess, like our generation, our friends.
I hope so.
Because it's like you're working, you're doing things, and you're growing together in terms of a community. And like how we're raving about it now, how you love that tracksuit. In 10 years, I can see you in that tracksuit. And it's things like, I've always wanted that beaded headpiece that Max was wearing. Obviously, like, it's for very slim people. So if she does larger stuff, I'll wear it.
I can't sit down in the car.
No, but you don't need to, you just got to look good. You just got to, you know, suck it in. But I think it's like, that's the next thing. Like, I know she was on Matches last, well, she's on Matches.com, and now that's transitioning to women's wear as well, so it's like the duality of that. So I think it's really, I know it's like giving people a want, I don't know how to express, like a want to get, like how you want to get there. You're not, oh, it's too luxury, so I'm not going to even try. You still want to because it's still relatable. And by not lending out and oversaturating us with it in every fashion magazine, we're like, when we do see it, it's in the right context. So every time you see it, we're like, okay, this is what. So you're still in love with it, even if it's from 3 seasons ago, like this is still what I like, because it still is that. So I think the customer will be like, our lot next 10 years, I guess. Hopefully she'll be here in 10 years, not saying no one's going to buy it, but our generation in 10 years will be definitely in the right place.
I guess it's interesting because it hasn't been socialized yet, so to speak.
Exactly.
And maybe now it will be, you know, more so available, which I think is great, and it should be, you know. People should be given the option of Wells Bonner menswear. Men should be given the option of Wells Bonner in comparison to, you know, another brand who you wouldn't feel as good in. Another tracksuit you wouldn't feel as good in.
Juicy couture, perhaps.
Exactly.
Don't just a juicy couture.
No.
Really comfortable.
Oh, nice, cool.
Would you wear it then?
I mean, I used to do music for her, and yes, she would let me borrow it for events. We did a party once, and it was me and someone she'd used in the graduate collection called Larry. Some of us know Larry. Larry's been on panels here actually as well. And yeah, I mean, it just, as a host of an event, I just felt like the most fabulous person I'd ever even imagined ever. And yeah, I think people deserve to feel that way. But it was, you know, and I think I enjoyed that it was a little bit difficult to move around in, and it was a bit tight, you know. But yeah, it just really elevates you, makes you feel completely fabulous. And her attention to history and the research, I think, is what makes it something you'll always come back to. Something where these garments like that tracksuit will still look fabulous in 10, 20 years.
Timeless.
Yeah. I mean, because she's such a kind of creative visionary, because everything is so specific and she's very focused, I know she's talked about kind of finding it difficult to just have people just buy the clothes if they're not super kind of invested in it.
Sure.
Because like she pours so much energy into everything, thinking about everything from you know, creating little booklets to go along with shows. I know she created kind of Nollywood style DVD with one of her shows, and these kind of bits and pieces that all kind of bring the brand together as a whole idea. And I was reading an interview with her where she had been mentioning that she kind of found it a bit difficult to kind of just hand over clothes in that way. But as a kind of creative director, I can really see her working very well at another house, and that's kind of what I imagine she would end up doing. But I don't know. I mean, where do you guys imagine her going next?
Well, I think you see the transition with the women's. I think obviously in the beginning it was men's, and then I think as the confidence and as obviously probably from what she's hearing from a retail side as well, both guys and girls both buying into the clothing. So maybe there's more of a progression, and I know there's more and more appearance of female models on the runway as we can see here. So it'll be interesting to see collaborations as well, because maybe that's another way of her sort of widening her demographics. I mean, you know, in terms of who's actually buying the product, because as you said, you know, it is quite a high-priced item at the moment. So, but I'm sure whatever Grace does, it's going to be done with taste and and you know, class as well. So, I mean, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. Yeah.
I think taste and class is a great way to sum up, and I think we've got to a good time, right? So I want to thank all my wonderful guests today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for watching.